Well, it's now the first month of the new year. Christmas is behind us, New Year's is behind us, and the social media posts about the origins of Christmas and how no one should be celebrating it are dying down. Here's one more for you, though. We're not going to get into the origins and the practices of each holiday and which God it represents and serves. That's research for you to do on your own. This video is going to be about what to do when you find this information out. If you research Christmas, you're going to see that it comes from the Feast of Saturnalia. You're going to see that there are elements of Norse mythology or Odin worship in it. I know it's not what it means to you. Unlike the ancient Romans or the Norse, you're not worshiping the tree. You're not sacrificing pigs to Odin. But does that really separate the festivities and the traditions from modern practices? Is Yahweh okay with that? Can we say Christmas isn't Saturnalia to me, but it's the day I remember and celebrate the birth of Yeshua? I don't want to speculate. I don't want to guess. Who could know the mind of Yahweh? Let's turn to Scripture, because the Torah is his instructions on living. It is how he wants us to behave, and it gives us clear insights into the way he thinks. Let's turn to Deuteronomy chapter 7. And just for some context, the Israelites have come through the desert and they're approaching the promised land. And Yahweh is reminding them of his instructions. And in chapter 7, he's talking about what to do with idols. We're going to skip ahead to verses 25 and 26. They say, "You shall burn the engraved images of their gods with fire. You shall not covet the silver or the gold that is on them, nor take it for yourself, lest you be snared in it, for it is an abomination to Yahweh your God. You shall not bring an abomination into your home and become a devoted thing like it. You shall utterly detest it. You shall utterly abhor it, for it is a devoted thing." I think we all will quickly agree that we can't bring idols into our homes and that we should abhor idols. Scripture's clear on that. But if you read this verse closely, it talks about the gold and silver plating on the idol. Verse 25 says, "You shall not covet the silver or the gold that is on them," referring back to the idol. Now, what does it mean to covet? Covet is the Hebrew word hamad, and it means to desire or think greatly of. So when we see the gold and silver that comes off of these idols, we can't look at it and say that gold and silver is a precious thing. It's desirable. So if we can't desire it, what does Yahweh tell us to do? In verse 26, he says, "You shall detest it." And not just detest it, but utterly detest it. And you should abhor it, but not just abhor it. You should utterly abhor it. Why? Because it's a devoted thing. Devoted in this verse means doomed or set for destruction. So Yahweh has deemed that the gold and silver plating that came off of the idol is doomed for destruction. It needs to be destroyed, according to Yahweh. Yahweh even calls it an abomination, which means something disgusting. The gold and silver that came off of the idol, in the eyes of Yahweh, is something disgusting. And he instructs us to see it through his eyes. We are to utterly abhor it. We are to utterly detest it. It is not precious. Yahweh goes on to say that we can't even bring it into our house. He gives a reason why. In verse 26, he says, "You shall not bring an abomination into your house and become a devoted thing like it." By bringing it into our house, the detestability of this thing transfers onto us. It's like a contaminant. Yahweh sees that gold and silver was part of an idol. It is no longer precious, and he detests it. He wants us to detest it, and he doesn't want it in our home because it will ensnare us and make us detestable. Now, before you say, well, that was just the instructions for the Israelites while they were going into the land, it's not for us today. I'm going to challenge you on that. If that's your thought, then we need to stop and think for a second. Who is Yahweh? What is something that defines his character? Malachi 3:6 says, I, Yahweh, do not change. So if Yahweh abhorred the idols and the gold and silver connected to them at the Jordan, he's going to feel the same way today. Leviticus chapter 18, verses 26 through 30 says, You shall therefore keep my statutes and my ordinances, and shall not do any of these abominations, neither the native born nor the stranger who lives as a foreigner among you. For the men of the land that were before you had done all these abominations, and the land became defiled, that the land not vomit you out also when you defile it, as it vomited out the nations that were before you. For whoever shall do any of these abominations, even the soul that do them, shall be cut off from among their people. Therefore you shall keep my requirements, that you do not practice any of these abominable customs which were practiced before you, and that you do not defile yourselves with them. I am Yahweh your God. Now, Leviticus 18 is not talking about idol worship. It's talking about inappropriate relationships. But you see, Yahweh has the same thing to say about the relationships as he does the gold and silver that came from the idols. The practices were abominable, and if you do them, you are abominable, and the land will vomit you out. Why does Yahweh require us to be different than the world? In Deuteronomy 14:2, he says, For you are a holy people to Yahweh your God, and Yahweh has chosen you to be a people for his own possession above all the peoples who are on the face of the earth. You're to be holy. That means set apart, different from everyone else. People of the nations, they can celebrate Christmas. Not Yahweh's people. Yahweh's people have to be set apart. It's not just contrarian. They don't just have to do the opposite of what everyone else does, but they have to follow the rules that make them different and the rules that Yahweh gave them. Yahweh says if something comes from an idol, if something was devoted to an idol or a demon, you can't have anything to do with it. We even see similar instructions from the apostles in Acts chapter 15. When the Jerusalem council met, they gave instructions to the new believers. And one of the instructions they gave them was found in Acts 15, verses 28 and 29. It says, For it seemed good to the Ruach HaKodesh and to us to lay no greater burden on you than these necessary things, that you abstain from things sacrificed to idols, from blood, from things strangled, and from sexual immorality, from which if you keep yourselves, it will be well with you. Shalom. So here James was telling the new believers to abstain from things sacrificed to idols. Why? Well, for the same reason that we can't possess the gold and silver that came off of the idols. It was something that was devoted to the idol, therefore it is now devoted to destruction. When we come across these rules that we find, and it's a little hard to take sometimes, it might feel like a little restrictive. Well, I can't have the gold and silver that was once part of an idol. I can't have something that was sacrificed to an idol. I shouldn't have something that came from or was devoted to an idol before it was called a Christian holiday. That might feel a little restrictive. So we need to check ourselves. Are we being legalistic? Are we making up rules where they don't exist? So can we go through Scripture and find any examples where people disobeyed the instructions from Deuteronomy 7:25 and 26, and they took something that was part of an idol? We can. So let's go to Joshua chapter 7. In verse 1, we read, But the sons of Israel committed a trespass in the devoted things. For Achan, the son of Carmi, the son of Zabdi, the son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, took some of the devoted things. Therefore the anger of Yahweh burned against the sons of Israel. It doesn't say that it was gold or silver that Achan took. It doesn't say it was meat sacrificed to an idol. It doesn't really tell us what it is, but it tells us it was a devoted thing. And Deuteronomy chapter 7:25 clearly says what a devoted thing is and how we should treat it. Achan did not follow the instructions, and the anger of Yahweh burned against Israel. Okay, well, that was one example. Can we find two? We can. Let's head over to 1 Samuel chapter 15. In chapter 15, Saul was given instructions to go and strike Amalek and utterly destroy everything. But in verse 9, we read, "But Saul and the people spared Agag, and the best of the sheep, of the cattle, and of the fat calves, and the lambs, and all that was good, and were not willing to utterly destroy them. But everything that was vile and refuse, that they destroyed utterly." Well, those animals, as precious as they may appear through the eyes of Saul and the people, Yahweh had already devoted them to destruction. He had instructed the people to kill them, and they did not. They disobeyed. They took a devoted thing and they kept it for themselves. And in verse 10, we read, "Then the word of Yahweh came to Samuel, saying, It grieves me that I have set up Saul to be king, for he has turned back from following me, and has not carried out my commandments." And Samuel was angry, and he cried to Yahweh all night. This is one of the things that led to Saul being rejected as the king by Yahweh. He didn't obey the instructions on how to handle the utterly detestable, devoted things. Just like Yahweh's instructions were not limited to the silver and gold plating of an idol, but really to anything that was once devoted to an idol. We saw examples through Scripture that when Yahweh devotes something to destruction, we have to follow the instructions on how to handle a devoted item. We have to abhor it, and we cannot bring it into our homes. So we know, and it's up to you to do research, but we do know that Christmas, Easter, Valentine's Day, Halloween, pretty much all the holidays that the world celebrates come from what we call pagan origins. In other words, they're festivals or practices that were once used to honor demons and over time have been syncretized by the church. And instead of the feast at the winter solstice celebrating Saturn, we now celebrate Yeshua. Yahweh tells us that that's not okay, and it doesn't please him. He doesn't forget the connection between the winter solstice festivals and the demons that they served. So, just like Yahweh's instructions were not limited to the gold and silver on an idol, these instructions are not limited to holidays. It's up to each of us to find out what we do and where it comes from. What traditions do we keep that once served demons? They cannot be used in our lives to serve Yahweh, and they should never be in our homes or in our lives. Let's have a nice conversation in the comments below. Yah bless.